The stars above Vorthal burned cold and distant as the Terran dreadnought Vigilant Sun emerged from pulse lattice space. The giant vessel, over 3 kilometers long, cast a dark shadow across the orbit of the ancient alien world. Dozens of smaller escort ships followed in tight formation, their black hulls gleaming with soft blue lines of energy. Commander James stood at the observation deck, hands behind his back. His uniform, dark silver with golden stripes at the collar, was spotless. His eyes, sharp and steady, scanned the surface of Vorthal below, a planet once sacred to alien diplomacy, now the site of a summit between species that barely trusted one another. Behind him, the ship's engines hummed low and steady. AI interfaces blinked silently on nearby panels, showing orbital telemetry and atmospheric scans. James didn't need to look. His mind was already 5 steps ahead. Walker entered the deck, his boots echoing softly on the polished floor. "We've secured orbit. No resistance from the locals," Walker reported. He was taller than James, broader too, with a short military cut and a jaw like carved stone. James nodded once. "As expected. They won't try to stop us, not directly." Walker crossed his arms. "Still doesn't feel right. A summit on alien soil. No security from our side except this fleet. And they ask for you personally." James turned slowly to face him. "That's exactly why I came. If this is a trap, I want to spring it myself." Walker gave a short laugh. "You never did like playing it safe." The comms panel flickered. Willing's voice came through, crisp and calm. "Landing zone is clear. Drone sweeps confirm no heavy weapon systems on the surface. Vorthal looks quiet." "Too quiet," Walker muttered under his breath. James tapped his comm link. "Prep the dropship. Assemble my team." As the crew moved with precision, James stared once more at the planet. Vorthal wasn't just old, it was ancient. Large obsidian ruins marked its equator, leftovers from a time before even the Vrali species ruled. Some said it was the first meeting place of the old empires. Others believed it was a graveyard. He didn't believe in myths, but he respected history. And Vorthal felt heavy with it. Within the hour, James stepped off the sleek black dropship and onto alien soil. The wind on Vorthal was dry and carried a metallic scent. Dust floated in the air like fine ash. Ahead of him, a long stone pathway led to the summit temple, massive and weathered by time, but still intact. John, the youngest in the group, adjusted his helmet as he looked around. "Creepy place. Feels like we're being watched." "We are," Willing replied calmly, scanning with a handheld device. "Thermal readings above normal. Something's moving in those ruins." "Let them watch," Walker grunted. "We came in peace, but we didn't come unarmed." James raised a hand. "Hold formation. No weapons drawn, unless I say so." The summit hall loomed ahead. Tall black arches, carved symbols, and long banners that fluttered with no wind. Inside, alien envoys stood waiting. Tall, thin figures draped in layered robes. Skin like polished stone. Eyes without pupils. James walked forward slowly. Every step echoed on the smooth floor. The aliens did not bow. They did not speak. Finally, one stepped forward. A voice, smooth and strange, echoed from its mouth. "Welcome, human." James bowed slightly. "Let's speak of peace." No response. Just silence. James's eyes wandered along the walls, across the floors, and stopped. Stare, carved into the stone just below the central pillar, was a strange symbol. A glyph. It was not alien, not fully. He had seen it once, deep in the Terran archives. It was the symbol for lattice severance. His breath caught. Something was wrong. "Scan the room," he whispered to Willing. Subtle passive scan. "Now." Willing nodded and began tapping his interface. James didn't move. He didn't blink. The silence in the hall stretched longer. They weren't here to talk. They were here to watch. And something was already in motion. Far below the surface of Vorthal, deep beneath its lifeless plains and shattered temples, A chamber pulsed with ancient energy. Blue lines glowed faintly along its stone walls, lighting the faces of the alien leaders gathered in secret. They stood in a circle, cloaked in silence. No lights, no noise, only the low hum of something old, something forgotten, waiting to awaken. At the center stood Ambassador. His tall, lean frame was wrapped in a dark cloak, his pale skin almost translucent under the chamber's glow. His eyes were sharp and cold, glowing faintly with the faint blue shimmer of lattice-born energy. He stared at the relic in front of him, a device like a broken sphere, suspended in midair, surrounded by ancient Vorian runes. "This is the heart," he said quietly. "The origin of the firewall protocol. The only thing left that can halt their empire." An older alien, scaled and hunched, stepped forward. "You would unleash this. It hasn't been activated in 10,000 cycles. We sealed it for a reason." Ambassador didn't look at him. "And now you would let the humans rewrite the galaxy while we do nothing. Your fear is why we lost the stars." The other leaders exchanged uneasy glances. One stepped forward, his voice heavy with doubt. "If this fails, they will wipe us out." "If we do nothing," Ambassador said, "they won't have to. They will absorb us, one by one. Culture by culture, species by species, until only humans remain." He turned toward the relic and raised a small crystalline key. The glow from the sphere grew stronger. A tremor ran through the floor. "Once activated," Ambassador said, "the device will reach into the lattice itself. It will sever their command grid, collapse their travel lanes, and throw their empire into silence." He stepped forward and inserted the key. The sphere began to spin. On the surface, James paced the summit corridor, deep in thought. The carved glyph still lingered in his mind. The symbol for lattice severance. A threat. A warning. Maybe both. Willing returned, holding a datapad. "Scans show minor energy signatures coming from beneath the summit," he said. "They're faint, but they're old, like pre-empire." "Any active systems?" James asked. "Hard to tell. Too much interference." James nodded slowly. "This place isn't just a meeting ground. It's a vault." Walker entered from the side, helmet under his arm. "All alien envoys are inside. Quiet. Too quiet. They're not here for peace talks." "I know," James replied. "They're here to watch us fall." Walker frowned. "Then we should leave. Hit orbit, regroup, strike first, if we have to." "No," James said. "Not yet. If they're using something ancient, something lattice-based, I need to see it." Staler, their linguist, joined them with a worried look. "I found something." He tapped his device, bringing up a scan of wall carvings. "These symbols, they match the old Vorian records. A legend. They called it the Second Gate." "What does it do?" James asked. Staler hesitated. "They said it could cut the stars, sever the link between points. It was never meant to be used." William looked up sharply. "Then they're not bluffing. They have a real weapon." James clenched his jaw. "We need eyes underground." That night, under the cover of darkness, William and 2 recon units slipped into the lower ruins through a hidden tunnel. The stone halls twisted like a maze, lit only by small scanners and faint pulses from their suits. The further they went, the colder it became. The walls vibrated with something unnatural, like a quiet scream trapped in stone. They reached a wide chamber, barely visible through the darkness. Strange machinery lined the walls, some alien, some clearly modified with newer tech. At the center they saw it, the sphere, spinning. Awake, William's eyes widened. "They've already started." A shadow moved behind him. He turned, just in time to dodge a glowing blade. Alien guards had been waiting. Blasters flared, alarms triggered. And far above, James stood on the summit balcony, looking out at the stars as a deep tremor shook the ground beneath his feet. He didn't know what the aliens were awakening, but it had already begun. Sirens echoed through the halls of the summit. The deep rising tone wasn't human. It came from alien tech embedded in the walls, ancient, but still working. James stood frozen for a moment, listening to the low, vibrating sound. His instincts kicked in. "William," James called into his comm. "Report." Only static answered. He tried again. Nothing. Walker ran up the corridor toward him, rifle slung across his back. "Underground recon is silent." William's signal dropped. James clenched his jaw. They triggered something. "Then we're done waiting," Walker said. "We take control of this summit now." "No," James replied firmly. "If we strike first, we prove them right. We become the threat they fear." Walker stared at him. "James, they're not afraid of us. They hate us. You saw their faces. They didn't come to talk." Before James could respond, Staler stepped out of the side corridor, face pale. He held up a datapad. "We finished decoding the glyphs. This is worse than we thought." He tapped the pad, revealing ancient symbols now fully translated. "They're not just cutting off the lattice," he said. "They're using it against us. The device down there is tied into our own gate systems. If they activate it fully, they'll overload the entire Terran network, collapse every lattice connection. Our fleets will be stranded. Worlds will go dark." James looked at the symbols. The old alien script was clear now. "Collapse the links, shatter the chain, silence the empire." "They've turned our strength into a weakness," he said quietly. Elsewhere, Ambassador stood in the underground control chamber. The sphere spun faster now, drawing power from unseen threads in space. Glowing lines crawled up the walls, pulsing like veins. An aide approached. "Human sensors are scanning again." "Let them scan," Ambassador said. "Let them realize what we've done. Just in time to understand they are powerless to stop it." The other leaders watched from the shadows, unsure. "We agreed to disable their empire," one said, "not to start a war." "This is not a war," Ambassador replied coldly. "It's a reset. They came too far, too fast. If we don't stop them now, we become shadows in their future." Back in the summit chamber, James stood before the alien delegation. The room was tense. The envoys still said nothing. Their faces gave away little emotion, but their silence was heavy. James stepped forward. "You built a weapon beneath this summit," he said. "You plan to cut our lattice, leave billions isolated. You want to cripple us." The alien in front didn't move. "We came here for peace," James said louder now. "But this is betrayal." Still no answer. Then slowly, the alien envoy spoke. "You call it betrayal. We call it survival." James narrowed his eyes. "This will lead to war." The envoy's voice was calm. "There was always going to be war. You just couldn't see it yet." James turned away, fury rising in his chest. He tapped his comm. "Walker, ready the strike teams. We're going down." In the corridor outside, Jane stopped James as he passed. "Sir," he said, "may I speak freely?" James paused. "Go ahead. I grew up on a colony we took from the Seraki. My mother taught at a school, rebuilt on their old ruins. Every day I saw reminders of what we destroyed to make room for ourselves." James said nothing. Jane continued. "They see us as invaders, and maybe we are. We didn't start this war," James said. "We just refused to stay small." Jane nodded. "I know, but maybe growing this fast came at a cost we never paid attention to." James placed a hand on Jane's shoulder. "That's why we're here now, to pay attention, to stop this before it's too late." In orbit, human systems began reporting strange glitches. Lattice gates dimmed, pulse channels trembled. Across the stars, commanders noticed sudden delays in data and communication. Confusion spread. James stepped into the lift that would take him and his team deep into the planet's core. He looked up one last time at the distant sky. If Ambassador succeeded, the stars would go silent. He couldn't let that happen. The descent into the underground chamber was long and silent. James stood at the front of the strike team, armored and ready. The lift shook as it dropped deep below the summit, into the ancient core of Orthol. Behind him were Walker, John, Staler, and 6 elite soldiers. They all knew this mission could decide the fate of the entire Terran Empire. Walker broke the silence. "Once we breach the vault, we go straight for the device. No delays." James nodded. Our goal is to shut it down. No unnecessary bloodshed. But if we're fired on, we respond with full force. John checked his rifle, his hands tense. What if the device is already active? Then we stop it, James said firmly. No matter what, at the heart of Vorthol, the firewall device was fully awake. The sphere now spun in a high-speed rotation, suspended by invisible fields. Pulses of energy surged through the chamber, lighting up the walls. Dozens of alien engineers and guards moved around it, feeding the system commands. Ambassador stood near a tall console, watching as the final sequence began. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Report," he said. One of the technicians answered. "Terran systems are destabilizing. We estimate full collapse of their outer lattice networks in under 10 minutes. Ambassador gave a slow nod. "Then the stars will fall silent." The lift door opened with a hiss. James and his team stepped into a wide, glowing corridor. The air was charged with energy. The walls vibrated. They moved in formation, weapons raised. "Contact ahead," Walker whispered. 3 alien guards blocked the entrance to the main vault. They raised their weapons but hesitated. James stepped forward, weapon lowered. "Stand down. This doesn't have to end in violence." One of the guards aimed. The others followed. The first shot fired. Walker reacted instantly, returning fire. A short, brutal fight followed. The aliens were trained, but the Terran soldiers were faster. In seconds, the path was clear. James didn't speak. He pushed forward. Inside the chamber, alarms blared. Ambassador turned sharply. "They're here." He gave a signal. More guards moved to the inner gate. James and his team stormed in. The room exploded in chaos. Blaster fire shouted orders, and flashing lights. Walker and John took opposite sides, covering their team as they advanced toward the device. Staler ran to a side console, typing fast. "I can delay the sequence, but I need time." "Do it," James ordered. "We'll hold the line." Ambassador watched from the upper platform. His calm began to fade. He moved toward the central control node. James spotted him. Their eyes met. James raised his rifle, but didn't fire. "Stop this," he shouted. "You'll destroy everything." Ambassador replied with a steady voice. "That's the point." He placed his hand on the activation plate. Staler shouted, "I can't stop it. The system is locked. Only a full core overload can shut it down." James made a choice. "Can we overload it manually?" he asked. Staler hesitated. "Yes, but it could take out the whole chamber. Maybe the entire summit." James turned to his team. "Fall back to the upper tunnels. I'll stay." William's voice came through the comm. He was alive. Already inside the upper reactor, William said, breathing hard, "I'll handle the overload." "You stop, Ambassador." James froze. "You won't make it out." "I know." A pause. "Let me do this, James. For the Empire." The comm went silent. A rumble shook the chamber. Lights flickered. The sphere cracked slightly, glowing brighter than ever. Ambassador backed away, staring at the machine in disbelief. James moved fast, scaling the side steps and reaching the upper console. Ambassador turned. "It's too late." James shook his head. "Not yet." He slammed the console, rerouting the energy flow. Below, the sphere burst in a wave of white-blue light. Chamber shook violently. Cracks opened in the walls. Alien guards ran in panic. A blast of light shot through the ceiling as the firewall collapsed inward. Then silence. James opened his eyes. He was lying on the floor of the upper platform, ears ringing, body sore. Walker's voice came through the comm. "James, are you alive?" He groaned. "Barely." The firewall device was gone. In its place was a glowing crater. The chamber was ruined, but the pulse lattice was safe. Staler limped toward him. It worked. The collapse redirected. "William, he did it." James closed his eyes for a moment, honoring his friend. Ambassador lay on the ground, wounded but alive. James looked at him. "You wanted silence," he said. "Now listen." The room was quiet. Only the hum of distant energy remained. Smoke drifted through the ruined chamber. The air was thick with dust and fading energy. The firewall device was gone, reduced to broken shards and scattered light. The ground still trembled underfoot, but the threat had passed. James sat on the cracked platform, breathing heavily. His armor was scorched. His hands were scraped and bruised, but he was alive. Somehow, Staler stood nearby, hunched over a damaged console. He pressed a few buttons and studied the screen. "It's over," he said. The device collapsed inward. The energy surge broke the link without triggering a full lattice shutdown. James nodded. The grid, Staler gave a slow breath. Shaken. A third of our outer systems went dark, but not permanently. The core network is stable. Damage can be repaired. Walker's voice came through the commast. Recovery ships inbound. We're patching relay lines now. Terran space is holding. James looked across the chamber. Ambassador was slumped against a broken pillar, wounded and silent. His dark robes were torn, and his left arm hung limp. James approached him, step by step. "You lost," James said quietly. Ambassador looked up, face pale but proud. "I slowed you. For now," James replied. "But at the cost of trust, of peace." Ambassador coughed. There was never going to be peace. Only control. Yours or ours. James stared at him for a long moment. "I didn't come here to rule. I came to stop the war before it began." Ambassador didn't respond. His eyes closed. James signaled 2 soldiers. "Take him to the med bay. Keep him alive." Walker and John arrived soon after, guiding a rescue team into the chamber. Their eyes swept over the wreckage. "You did it," Walker said. "But Willem," James looked away. "He gave us the time we needed." Jane placed a hand on James's shoulder. "He saved billions." Hours later, James stood on the summit's upper balcony. The sky above Vorthal was clear now. Stars blinked in the distance. A faint shimmer marked the spot where the lattice threads danced back into stability. Terran support ships hovered in the upper atmosphere, running repair scans and restoring communication links. One by one, the outer colonies came back online. James stared at the stars in silence. Walker stepped beside him. "They're calling you back to Earth. The Council wants answers." "They'll get them," James said. "But they won't like what I have to say." "What are you going to tell them?" "That the aliens were scared. Not of war, but of extinction. Of being forgotten." Walker folded his arms. "And what about us? Are we really the future of the galaxy?" James turned to face him. "Only if we choose to be." In the days that followed, the Terran Empire began repairing the damage. Emergency gates were activated. Colony signals were restored. Panic faded, but something had changed. For the first time, the galaxy saw a different side of humanity. Not just expansion, but mercy. Restraint. Alien factions sent envoys again. Not to attack, not to beg, but to talk. A fragile trust began to form. James attended those meetings. He didn't speak much, but when he did, the room listened. The man who stopped the collapse of the stars didn't need to shout. He simply stood. In his private chamber aboard the Vigilant Sun, James opened a small hollow file. It was Willem's last message, recorded before the overload. "If you're seeing this, I guess I did it. Sorry for the mess, James. I never liked goodbyes, so I'll just say this. Make it count. Make peace real. Or else we'll just keep fighting until there's nothing left." James closed the file. He looked out the viewport at the stars. They shimmered, steady and bright. Earth's orbit glowed like a crown of light. Thousands of ships surrounded the planet, moving in perfect harmony through the massive rings of the Terran core. The capital stood taller than ever. Silver towers, floating citadels, and glowing lattice bridges stretching across the skyline. The heart of humanity's empire beat strong. James stood at the main council hall. High above the clouds, the chamber was circular, walls made of transparent alloy, revealing stars on all sides. Counselors from across Terran space filled the seats, admirals, scientists, diplomats. Some looked angry, others confused, a few uncertain. James stood in the center, calm and steady. Counselor Darris, a sharp-eyed woman in blue robes, leaned forward. You risked everything, Commander. You endangered the Empire. James didn't flinch. I prevented a collapse. The alien factions didn't strike first. We forced them into fear. A murmur moved through the room. Another counselor spoke. The aliens attacked us with ancient weapons. Shouldn't we respond with strength? James looked around, meeting every gaze. We already showed them our strength. Now it's time to show them something harder: understanding. Someone laughed quietly. James stepped closer. We've built an empire that spans the stars. But if we rule through fear, we become the thing they tried to stop. We don't need to destroy them. We need to lead them. Silence followed. Then Counselor Darris spoke again. And what do you propose? A council, James said. Not just human. Alien voices too. Limited, equal, real. We set the example. Or we keep fighting forever. The room stayed quiet. Finally she nodded. We'll consider it. It wasn't approval, but it wasn't rejection. It was a start. Days later, in orbit above Orthol, a new station opened. Small, simple, and neutral. A place to talk. A place to rebuild trust. Ambassador sat inside a clean cell aboard a secure Terran cruiser. His wounds were healing. James visited him. You kept me alive, Ambassador said quietly. Why? James folded his arms. Because ending you wouldn't change anything. But maybe, your words still can. Ambassador smirked. You think the galaxy can be saved by talking? No, James said. But it's where we start. Walker took a new role. Commander of the Outer Defense Rings. He led patrols across distant colonies, making sure no enemy could sneak through again. Staler stayed in Vorthol, working with alien historians to understand the ancient tech that almost destroyed them all. Chan returned to his home colony, now a growing trade hub. He began teaching history, both human and alien. And James, he became something else, not just a commander, a symbol. 1 month later, James stood aboard a diplomatic ship, heading toward a new world, one never touched by war, waiting for first contact. He looked out at the vast stretch of stars. So many paths, so many futures. He smiled faintly. This time humanity would lead not with fire, but with light.